In the 1990s, in Canada, a series of mysterious abductions, rapes, and murders of young girls plunged the community into fear. The perpetrator was not just one person, but a twisted couple with a preference for BDSM. The wife blindly loved her husband and did everything to serve him. The couple was Bernardo and Karla Homolka. They not only committed inhumane acts, but also recorded their crimes as trophies. Even more heartless, they turned Karla's younger sister, Tammy Homolka, into a victim featured in these horrifying recordings. This video will uncover dark secrets, tragic stories, and chilling truths about one of the most twisted crimes in world history. Please like and subscribe to our channel to explore this chilling story with us right now. The case setting: Scarborough, a small town in Ontario, Canada. It all began on May 4, 1987, around 1 a.m. A young woman had just gotten off a bus in suburban Toronto and was suddenly attacked. Before she could scream, the attacker acted swiftly, covering her mouth and dragging her into the darkness. This was just the first in a series of 24 attacks over 5 years, targeting young women and teenage girls in the area. The perpetrator operated under the cover of darkness, earning the nickname the Scarborough Rapist from the media. Most attacks occurred in isolated locations, but in some cases, he daringly broke into victims' homes. Each crime was executed with meticulous planning and audacity, leaving the police struggling to track him down. He spread terror throughout the town, leaving residents in a state of constant anxiety and fear. During this time, the accomplice's younger sister, Tammy Homolka, was a 15-year-old girl full of beauty, intelligence, and vitality. Tammy had 2 sisters: Karla, a co-conspirator in the crimes, who was 5 years older, and Lori, the youngest sibling. Tammy looked up to Karla as a role model and protector. In October 1987, Karla met a man 5 years her senior, who had just graduated with a degree in accounting. Their love blossomed quickly. Tammy, though briefly saddened by sharing her sister's time with someone else, was genuinely happy to see Karla in love. Meanwhile, the mysterious attacks in the Scarborough area had been ongoing for over 7 months. Fear spread widely, especially for Tammy, who worried that without Karla, she would lose her protector against the lurking dangers. Fortunately, Karla's fiancé's unstable job situation led them to move in with Karla's family to save costs. Tammy was thrilled to have more time with her sister. In late 1990, the Christmas atmosphere filled the house. Tammy, Karla, and their family prepared for the holiday together. What seemed like a peaceful season turned into a tragedy in the early hours of December 24. Tammy was found unconscious in the living room. Her body was cold and unresponsive when discovered. The family frantically called an ambulance, but it was too late. Tammy passed away before reaching the hospital. Tammy's sudden death devastated her family. Doctors initially suspected alcohol poisoning from excessive drinking. However, in reality, Tammy had been overdosed with sedatives administered by Karla, leading to her death, a truth concealed at the time. In June 1991, Karla and her fiancé held a wedding. Afterward, they moved to a new house in the suburbs. The family thought they could find solace after Tammy's passing, but an unexpected event was about to change everything. In 1993, Karla appeared at the police station with bruises and a panicked expression, demanding to speak to an investigator about her husband's horrifying secrets. Karla provided the police with a series of videotapes containing undeniable evidence of her husband's crimes. These tapes shocked even the most seasoned investigators. In the tapes, the police saw how Paul manipulated, abused, and recorded the psychological and physical torture of his victims. These pieces of evidence were quickly submitted to the town's court. Could this be the Scarborough rapist that the police had been tirelessly searching for? According to Karla, before marriage, she had no idea Paul was a dangerous man. She claimed that only after becoming his wife did she realize the truth and endure his violent behavior. Paul not only manipulated her psychologically, but also used her as a tool to carry out his acts of kidnapping and assault on other victims. However, the prosecution did not fully trust Karla's testimony. Prosecutors repeatedly questioned her, suggesting that Karla was not just a victim, but also an accomplice in many of the crimes. The evidence from the tapes showed that Karla not only witnessed, but also assisted Paul in some of his wrongful acts. During the first trial in February 1993, Karla continued to claim that she was threatened and controlled by Paul. She recounted instances of abuse, including violent sexual acts (BDSM) imposed by Paul. The jury, though somewhat sympathetic, could not overlook Karla's role in the crimes. They decided to continue investigating to determine the extent of her involvement. As for the prime suspect, Paul Bernardo became the #1 suspect after Karla's accusations. But the police needed time to analyze, verify the evidence, and link the tapes to specific crimes. Paul was born in 1964 to a middle-class family in Toronto, Canada. As a child, Paul was known as a sweet, well-mannered boy with a charming smile, easily winning the affection of those around him. However, Paul's family life was far from perfect. At age 11, his father was charged with molesting a young girl in the neighborhood. He was also accused of inappropriate behavior toward his biological daughter, Paul's sister. This incident left a deep psychological impact on the young boy. After his father's scandal, Paul grew up feeling ashamed and resentful. Family conflicts and shattered trust led him to develop distorted thoughts about people and relationships. In 1982, Paul entered college and quickly became a prominent student thanks to his handsome looks and confidence. After graduation, he worked for a renowned multi-level marketing company. The work environment helped Paul hone his communication skills and taught him psychological manipulation tactics, which he later applied in both his professional and personal life. Paul spent time reading books and watching videos by motivational speakers to enhance his skills in controlling and influencing others' emotions. He began frequenting bars, using his attractive appearance and communication skills to charm women. In early 1987, Paul started working at the prestigious accounting firm Price Waterhouse. However, this was also when his personal life began to unravel. In May 1987, Paul attacked 2 young women in the Toronto area. By July of the same year, another attack with a similar pattern occurred. The attacks were meticulously planned. Paul often chose secluded areas, waited until late at night, and ambushed victims when they were off guard. He would disappear quickly, leaving very few traces behind. His audacity baffled the police. They called him the Scarborough Rapist and increased their investigative efforts. However, Paul remained confident, leading a double life as a model employee by day and a predator by night. In October 1987, during a pet convention in Toronto, Paul met Karla Homolka, a 17-year-old girl with golden blonde hair and a radiant smile. Karla was immediately drawn to Paul, a man with an attractive appearance and a sharp way of speaking. After just a few meetings, Paul and Karla began an intense relationship. They discovered unexpected commonalities, including an obsession with control and distorted views on relationships. Paul quickly took control of the relationship, calling himself the boss and turning Karla into someone completely subservient to him. Blinded by love, Karla not only accepted but willingly fulfilled all of Paul's demands. Paul began controlling every aspect of Karla's life, from her clothing and hairstyle to the people she was allowed to interact with. He frequently addressed her with derogatory terms, damaging her self-esteem, but Karla endured it all willingly. To please Paul, Karla even created a self-improvement list based on his demands. Their relationship transcended love, becoming a toxic bond where Paul had complete psychological control over Karla. Over time, the toxic relationship between Paul and Karla became increasingly binding. The two not only shared distorted thoughts, but also encouraged each other to commit brutal acts. Their connection was not just love, it was complicity in crime. Karla even agreed to Paul's sick idea, recording violent assaults on women using a video camera. In December 1990, Paul began persuading Karla that she should make amends by offering her sister Tammy as a Christmas gift to him. In reality, Paul's psychological manipulation skills were extraordinary. If he had pursued a career in law enforcement, he might have been highly successful. Initially, this idea left Karla bewildered, but under Paul's threats and manipulation, she eventually agreed. Karla planned to use alcohol mixed with eggnog and sleeping pills to render Tammy unconscious, making it easier for Paul to carry out his plan. It was a bold step, far beyond anything they had done before. On the evening of December 23, 1990, amid the peaceful Christmas atmosphere in the Homolka household, Karla and Paul began executing their plan. Karla's parents were asleep upstairs, unaware of the tragedy unfolding in the basement. Karla offered Tammy a drink that had been prepared in advance. Trusting her sister, Tammy had no suspicions and quickly fell into a state of unconsciousness due to the effects of the drugs. Once Tammy was unconscious, Karla and Paul carried her to the basement. There, Paul had already set up a video camera to record his violent assault. However, the unexpected happened. Tammy began convulsing violently while Paul was assaulting her. She vomited and struggled to breathe. Panicking, Karla attempted to revive Tammy using basic first aid knowledge she had. But all efforts were in vain. Tammy stopped breathing right in front of them. Paul and Karla quickly staged the scene. They dressed Tammy back in her clothes, cleaned up any suspicious evidence, and called an ambulance, pretending that Tammy had suffered alcohol poisoning. When the ambulance arrived, Tammy was taken to the hospital, but the doctors declared her dead. The initial cause of death was determined to be suffocation from excessive alcohol consumption. Tammy's death was accepted by her family and those around them as a tragic accident. The cause was believed to be suffocation after vomiting in a drunken state. Paul quickly took advantage of the situation to manipulate Karla, continually blaming and tormenting her for her sister's death. Despite trying everything to please Paul, Karla received only reproaches and coldness in return. She became anxious, constantly worrying that one day Paul, the charming yet unpredictable man, would leave her. After Tammy's death, the couple moved to an apartment in St. Catharines, Ontario. Paul began making money through smuggling cigarettes and license plates across the border. Meanwhile, Karla, increasingly afraid of being abandoned, decided to find a replacement for Tammy. In June 1991, Karla met Jane, a smart 15-year-old girl. The young girl viewed Karla as a big sister and easily trusted her invitations. On June 7, 1991, Karla invited Jane to dinner and gave her drug-laced alcohol. When Jane lost consciousness, Karla took her to the apartment. There, Paul assaulted her while Karla assisted and recorded the entire incident on camera. The next morning, Jane woke up feeling sore and exhausted, but had no memory of what had happened. She was one of the few survivors, but the incident left her with psychological scars she would never forget. In mid-June 1991, Paul found Leslie Mahaffey, a 14-year-old girl with a strong personality who frequently skipped school and disobeyed her parents. On the fateful night, Leslie returned home late after a friend's funeral and was locked out for breaking curfew. Paul, driving around the area looking for an opportunity, saw Leslie standing outside her house. He approached her with a friendly demeanor, pretending to be concerned and offering her a ride to help. Without any suspicion, Leslie agreed to go with Paul. However, as soon as she got into the car, he blindfolded her and forced her to stay quiet. Paul then drove Leslie to the apartment. Karla was already accustomed to such events. The couple kept Leslie in the apartment for hours, assaulted her, and recorded everything on camera. Leslie's cries for help and screams echoed through the apartment, but no one nearby heard them. When Leslie stopped breathing due to the excessive assault, Paul and Karla decided to dispose of her body. They meticulously planned and decided to dismember the body to make it easier to conceal. On June 29, 1991, while Paul and Karla held a lavish wedding at a local church, Leslie's dismembered body, packed in a heavy bag, was discovered floating on a nearby lake by a couple boating. This horrifying discovery quickly drew the attention of the police. Investigators immediately arrived, conducted an autopsy, and found evidence of violence on Leslie's body. While the police focused on investigating the case, Paul and Karla enjoyed their honeymoon as if nothing had happened. On November 30, 1991, Terry Anderson, a 14-year-old girl with a radiant face and gentle personality, suddenly disappeared after leaving a friend's house. Her family and friends immediately reported her disappearance to the police, but her whereabouts remained a mystery for several months. 6 months later, Terry's body was discovered at Dawn House Port, Ontario. The body was severely decomposed from being underwater for an extended period, making forensic analysis difficult. Terry became the next victim in Paul and Karla's series of crimes. The couple continued searching for new targets, and nearly a year later, they set their sights on Risen Green, a shy and gentle 15-year-old girl. On April 16, 1992, Risen was on her way to school when Karla suddenly forced her into her yellow Chevrolet Camaro. The act was quick and decisive. Karla drove Risen to her apartment, where Paul was ready with a camera, and all plans had been prepared in advance. Risen became a victim of the same brutal acts as the previous ones, with Paul recording the entire ordeal on video. On April 30, 1992, Risen's body was discovered in a ditch in Burlington, Ontario. Her face was bruised, her head shaved, and one of her fingers severed. Police described the murder as extremely brutal. A witness stated that on the afternoon of April 16th, they saw two strangers forcing a girl into a cream-colored Camaro. However, Paul and Karla's car was yellow, which initially led police to overlook them as suspects. Following Risen's death, the Ontario police established a hotline to collect information from the public. Meanwhile, forensic experts from the FBI were brought in to assist with the investigation. By this time, Karla, exhausted by Paul's manipulation and abuse, decided to report him to the police. She claimed that Paul frequently assaulted her with a flashlight and forced her to participate in his plans. At this point, Canada's Forensic Science Centre utilized DNA testing technology, which was still relatively new at the time, to compare samples collected from crime scenes with Paul's DNA. A match led to Paul's arrest on February 17, 1993. During the investigation, Karla continued to provide statements to the authorities. However, her testimony was contradictory, as she portrayed herself as Paul's victim while simultaneously revealing her clear complicity in the crimes. At the trial, prosecutors presented evidence from the videotapes Karla had provided. The footage showed that she not only participated but also played an active role in several crimes. The court highlighted the immorality of both Karla and Paul. The peak of their depravity was evident in Risen's murder, after which they held a party as if nothing had happened. In September 1995, Paul was convicted of committing at least 24 cases of abduction, assault, and murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with no possibility of parole for the first 25 years. However, many investigators believe the actual number of victims may be much higher than what was disclosed. In 2005, Karla was released after reaching a plea deal with prosecutors, accepting a 12-year prison sentence. However, she had to comply with strict conditions, including not living near children under 16 and reporting her residence changes to the police. After her release, Karla attempted to restart her life, but residents in her area remained uneasy about living near someone with such a horrific criminal past. Despite numerous appeals, Paul received no leniency from the courts. In 2018, he was again denied parole, with victims' family lawyers stating that Paul had never expressed remorse. The story of Paul and Karla became the inspiration for many documentaries and television shows, exposing the horrifying truth about their crimes. The case leaves behind profound lessons, reminding us that love must always come with respect and ethical boundaries. Enabling manipulation and violence not only destroys one's own life, but also harms innocent people around them. This concludes the video. Please like and share to help spread this story. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more fascinating, thrilling, and meaningful stories. In 1987 in the United States, a girl was tortured, assaulted, and brutally murdered before being dismembered and scattered across Malala Forest. This was only the beginning of a series of murders involving 8 unfortunate victims. The press called the perpetrator the Malala Forest Killer, a name synonymous with terror in Oregon at the time. None other than Dayton Leroy Rogers, a man with antisocial personality disorder and violent deviant tendencies, was the killer. The mystery surrounding him might have remained unsolved if the murderer hadn't made a critical mistake, killing in a public place, a parking lot, instead of his usual remote locations. You are about to follow a true story. Join us as we uncover dark secrets and thrilling details you've never heard before. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel as we dive into today's story. Malala Forest, south of Portland, Oregon, is not just a place for camping or picnics. It became the stage for the heinous crimes of the man infamously known as the Malala Forest Killer. But who was he? And how did he become the embodiment of such terror? Dayton Leroy Rogers was born on September 30th, 1953, in Moscow, Idaho. His family, led by Father Ortis Rogers and Mother Jasper Rogers, were devout members of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. He lived a reclusive life with his 2 biological sisters, 3 adopted siblings, and 1 foster brother. From a young age, Dayton was confined to a harshly disciplined environment. Family evenings were filled with hours of Bible study, followed by prayers. Jasper, Dayton's mother, was responsible for taking care of the children, while Ortis worked various jobs to make ends meet, from a baker to a teacher, but he was often unemployed. Ortis also ruled the family with violence. Whenever the children did something wrong, the punishment rarely stopped at scolding. Beatings and physical abuse were his teaching methods. This led Dayton and his siblings to grow up in an environment of fear and trauma. Ortis banned anything he deemed inappropriate, including music, books, and images related to sexuality. The family frequently moved because Ortis couldn't hold a stable job. At one point, the entire family lived in a chicken truck with a dirt floor, which Ortis proudly called home. It was in this setting that Dayton began exhibiting abnormal behavior. As a teenager, he developed violent and deviant desires, sometimes directed toward his own sisters. He frequently stole his sister's shoes to satisfy his urges. This was only the beginning of a series of increasingly deviant behaviors in his life. In 7th grade, Dayton had his first encounter with the law when he was caught shooting BB guns at passing cars. When Ortis learned of the incident, he resorted to violence, claiming to beat the devil out of his son. These punishments only deepened Dayton's hatred and isolation. Concerned about Dayton's uncontrollable behavior, the family sent him to Columbia Academy, a strict religious private school in Spangle, Washington. However, Ortis soon lost his job again, forcing the family to move to Oregon. Dayton was then enrolled at Emerald Junior Academy, another private school. During this time, Dayton's relationship with his parents grew increasingly strained. He despised Ortis for his harshness and violence, and resented his mother for never standing up for him. At 16, Dayton dropped out of school and left his family, moving to Corvallis, Oregon, to start an independent life. He worked as a house painter and began building the facade of an ordinary man. But deep inside, the darkness of his childhood continued to grow, turning him into a nightmare no one could foresee. In 1972, after 3 years in Corvallis, Oregon, Dayton Leroy Rogers decided to move to Eugene to seek new opportunities. In Eugene, Dayton met Julie, a 16-year-old girl. With his charm and eloquence, Dayton quickly won her affection. Just weeks after meeting, the couple decided to marry, despite opposition from Julie's family. Dayton's family kept in touch with him until this point, but his marriage to Julie, a Lutheran, led them to cut all ties with him. Notably, what angered them was not that Julie was too young, but that her religious beliefs were incompatible with theirs. At first, their marriage seemed peaceful, but just 30 days after the wedding, Dayton committed his first crime. One day, he lured a 15-year-old girl into the woods near the Malala area under the pretense of intimacy. There, the darkness within his mind began to reveal itself. Dayton suddenly pulled out a knife and stabbed the girl repeatedly in the stomach. However, in a rare moment of clarity, he decided to take the girl to a nearby hospital for emergency care, with the knife still lodged in her stomach. At the hospital, Dayton fabricated a strange story. He told the police that the day before, he and the girl had gone into the woods to get close, and they had planned to meet again the next day. But when he came to pick her up, she had stabbed herself in the stomach. Dayton's story immediately raised suspicions among investigators. Why would a girl stab herself in the middle of the woods? And why did Dayton drive her for hours to the hospital instead of calling for help immediately? After partially recovering, the girl decided to tell the truth. She confirmed that they had gone into the woods the previous day, but during their second meeting, Dayton had unexpectedly attacked her. She managed to convince him to take her to the hospital, but he forced her to stick to his fabricated story to avoid greater trouble. The case went to court in February 1973. Prosecutors charged Dayton Leroy Rogers with aggravated assault with the intent to kill. However, Dayton, with his calm demeanor and persuasive ability, claimed the incident was merely a misunderstanding. During the trial, Dayton's defense attorneys argued that he didn't intend to kill the girl and acted in a moment of uncontrollable rage. They emphasized that Dayton took the victim to the hospital, something a murderer would never do. Psychologists were called to assess Dayton's mental state. Their report indicated that he suffered from severe neurological disorders with violent tendencies. However, the experts also concluded that he understood the difference between right and wrong and was fully aware of his actions at the time of the crime. Despite the victim's detailed and credible testimony, the jury was swayed by Dayton's feigned remorse. As a result, in late February 1973, Dayton received only 4 years of probation instead of a prison sentence. This verdict sparked controversy. Many in the community were outraged, believing the legal system had been too lenient on a dangerous individual. However, Dayton saw this as a pardon, and he began delving deeper into crime without restraint. Less than a year after the 1973 trial, Dayton Leroy Rogers was involved in another serious assault. This time, the victims were 2 teenage girls who had run away from home. Dayton and his wife, Julie, allowed the girls to stay at their home temporarily. During this time, Dayton sank deeper into alcoholism, frequently drunk and displaying inappropriate behavior toward women, especially the 2 girls living with him. He pressured them to fulfill his physical desires, threatening them with trouble if they refused. Julie, who had endured Dayton for a long time, finally reached her breaking point. One evening, unable to tolerate him any longer, she left the house, leaving Dayton alone with his twisted thoughts and the 2 teenage girls. That night, in a drunken rage, Dayton became more violent than ever. He attacked the 2 girls with a glass bottle, escalating the situation into a full-blown altercation. Despite being injured, the 2 girls managed to escape and found help from neighbors. The attack led to Dayton's immediate arrest. Authorities decided to send him to the Oregon State Mental Hospital for evaluation and treatment. This was the first time Dayton was formally forced to confront his severe psychological issues. While Dayton was confined, Julie seized the opportunity to escape him permanently. She filed for divorce and quickly moved to California, leaving Dayton and his dark thoughts behind. At the mental hospital, psychologists assessed Dayton and diagnosed him with severe personality disorders, including violent tendencies and a lack of emotional control. However, after a few months of treatment, in November 1974, the doctors declared that Dayton was cured. In December 1974, Dayton was released. This decision sparked controversy, with many suspecting that he had simply learned to manipulate the doctors by saying what they wanted to hear. Shortly after his release, Dayton quickly found a new woman named Sherry Miller. Perhaps he felt that having a wife would help him mask his true nature and appear normal in society. Sherry, unaware of Dayton's dark past, became deeply attached to him, believing she had found the man of her dreams. In October 1975, just 7 months after dating, Dayton Leroy Rogers married Sherry Miller. Initially, everything seemed fine. However, like his previous marriage, Dayton was arrested the same year on suspicion of assaulting a woman. Due to a lack of solid evidence, the jury could not convict him. Dayton escaped punishment yet again, which only boosted his confidence in outsmarting the law. In 1977, Dayton struck again. He picked up a young woman on the road, and after some casual conversation, drove her to a secluded area outside Portland. After parking, Dayton suddenly pulled out a knife, forcing her into the back seat. He tied her up with electrical wire and assaulted her while she was helpless and terrified. In her fear, the victim came up with a plan to escape. She asked to step outside to relieve herself. Dayton, smug in his control, agreed. As soon as she was free, she ran for her life. She sprinted until she reached a residential area where locals helped her and called the police. Meanwhile, Dayton tried to flee the scene, but in a twist of fate, his car got stuck in the mud. The spinning tires gave away his location, allowing the police to track and arrest him on the spot. In court, Dayton pleaded guilty but claimed that he acted due to a mental breakdown. This time, however, the jury was not convinced. Prosecutors presented a long record of his prior violent behavior, exposing him as a dangerous predator who had repeatedly escaped justice. Dayton was sentenced to 5 years in prison for first-degree assault. The prosecutor concluded the trial with a scathing remark. It's incomprehensible how a monster like Dayton Leroy Rogers could have been overlooked for so long. During his time in prison, Dayton tried to portray himself as a model inmate. He participated in rehabilitation programs and continued to manipulate those around him with his calm and trustworthy demeanor. In 1982, after serving his sentence, Dayton was released. He returned to Sherry, who still trusted her husband despite his crimes. Together they had a son, and Dayton opened a small engine repair shop to make a living. Outwardly, Dayton seemed to have settled down, but beneath the surface, the dark thoughts in his mind continued to grow, waiting for the opportunity to explode. On August 31, 1987, a gloomy morning, a hunter ventured deep into the Malala forest. Suddenly, he stopped when he noticed something unusual beneath the thick ferns. Curious, he approached for a closer look, only to be shocked. The naked body of a woman lay lifeless, her legs severed. Blood had dried, leaving only bruises on her body. Trembling, he rushed back to his vehicle and called the police. Shortly after, he led them back to the site, marking the beginning of a lengthy and haunting investigation. Police immediately cordoned off the area and expanded the search. Within a week, search teams discovered 6 more female bodies in the same area. The bodies were found in various stages of decomposition, indicating that the victims had been killed over a period of 1 to 3 months. 6 victims were identified: Lisa, 23, Maureen Hodges, 26, Christine Adams, 35, Cynthia Dorr, 20, Nan Cates, 26, and Riai Giles, 16. The 7th victim, due to advanced decomposition, could not be immediately identified. All the victims shared common traits. They had been strangled, assaulted, and inflicted with severe injuries to the abdomen, chest, and head before death. In some cases, their legs had been sawed off just above the ankles with what appeared to be a hacksaw. Near the dump sites, police collected numerous critical pieces of evidence. Empty Smirnoff vodka bottles, orange juice cartons, knotted shoelaces, torn fabric, and a knife with human tissue still on it were found. Upon further investigation, authorities realized the knife found at the scene matched the size and brand of the knife used to kill Jennifer Smith. On August 7, 1987, he attacked and murdered Jennifer Smith in the parking lot of an auto repair shop in Portland, Oregon. Several witnesses saw the incident and reported it to the police, leading to his immediate arrest before he could escape. Following this discovery, police quickly searched Dayton's home, workplace, and vehicle. They uncovered more disturbing evidence: partially burned women's clothing, bloodstains on the floor, and personal belongings of multiple victims. All this evidence led to an unavoidable conclusion. Dayton Leroy Rogers was not just a lone attacker. He was a serial killer who had used the Malala forest as a dumping ground to conceal his crimes. News of the case spread quickly, shocking the entire state of Oregon. The media dubbed Dayton as the Malala Forest Devil, and the gruesome details of the victims enraged the public. A comprehensive investigation was launched. Investigators worked tirelessly to understand Dayton's motives and how he selected his victims, aiming to construct a full profile of this deranged killer. In February 1988, Dayton Leroy Rogers was put on trial for the murder of Jennifer Smith, a young woman killed in the parking lot of a Denny's restaurant the year prior. During the trial, Rogers' defense lawyers attempted to build a case of justification. They argued that Jennifer's death was an act of self-defense. According to their narrative, Rogers reacted in panic after being attacked by Jennifer first. However, the prosecution dismantled this argument with a series of irrefutable evidence. They argued that Rogers had killed Jennifer not out of fear, but to satisfy his perverse sexual desires, as demonstrated by his prior crimes. The jury did not take long to reach a verdict. Rogers was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole. This was a temporary closure for Jennifer's case, but it was far from the end. Shortly afterward, Dayton was put on trial again, this time for the murder of 6 other women in the Malala forest. This second trial unveiled horrifying and deeply disturbing details. Witnesses included 11 former sex workers who had escaped encounters with Rogers. They recounted terrifying dates with him. According to their testimonies, Rogers started by being friendly, offering vodka and orange juice. But then things took a sudden turn. He became violent, tying their hands and feet and threatening to cut off their legs with a knife. Evidence from the Malala forest scene further corroborated the witnesses' accounts. Dozens of mini vodka bottles were found near the sites where the bodies were dumped. Hair and jewelry from the victims were also discovered in the wood stove at Rogers' repair shop. Prosecutors argued that Rogers had meticulously planned each murder. The victims were killed under similar circumstances, strangled, stabbed multiple times, and, in some cases, their legs sawed off with a hacksaw. On June 7, 1989, the jury convicted Rogers on 2 counts of aggravated murder for each of the 6 identified victims. The 7th victim, at the time of trial, remained unidentified, meaning Rogers was not charged for her death. It wasn't until 2013 that the 7th victim was identified as 18-year-old Tanya Johnson through DNA testing. By then, Rogers had already received the death penalty, making additional charges unnecessary. Rogers was sentenced to death in 1989, a punishment many believed was entirely deserved for his crimes. However, the death penalty in the United States, particularly in Oregon, has been a highly controversial issue, with frequent overturning of death sentences. Between 1989 and 2022, Dayton Rogers faced multiple retrials. The Oregon Supreme Court overturned his death sentences in 1992, 2000, 2012, and 2015, citing procedural issues and changes in the law. On November 12, 2021, Rogers' death sentence was overturned for the 4th time, influenced by new legislation signed by Governor Kate Brown that reduced the criteria for aggravated factors required to seek the death penalty. On December 13, 2022, Governor Kate Brown commuted the death sentences of all death row inmates in Oregon, including Rogers. He officially received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Now, at the age of 70, Dayton Leroy Rogers is serving his sentence at the Two Rivers Correctional Institution in Umatilla, Oregon. He has been officially linked to the deaths of 8 women, though many believe the true number of victims could be higher. Over the years, Rogers has never confessed to the details of his crimes. He has taken his secrets to the grave, leaving unanswered questions for the victims' families and those who seek to understand the true nature of a serial killer. The story of Dayton Leroy Rogers, the Malala Forest Devil, remains one of the most chilling serial killer cases in Oregon's history. It not only exposes horrifying crimes, but also forces us to confront the flaws in a legal system that allowed such a monster to evade justice for so long. The unfortunate victims, from mothers and daughters to young girls with bright futures, are forever etched in the memories of their families and friends. Their names serve as a reminder of the indelible pain caused by someone like Rogers. Thank you for following this story. Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel to stay updated on more horrifying and mysterious cases. Remember, no matter how terrifying the truth, it must be told to ensure justice is served.
In the 1970s in the United States, a series of kidnappings and assaults against women were reported across 19 states, from California to West Virginia. Over nearly 40 years, more than 90 victims were identified as deceased or missing. Most of the victims were street workers or drug addicts, leading to many cases being overlooked or improperly investigated. The perpetrator used strangulation as the method of murder, often causing the cases to be mistaken for drug overdoses or natural causes. The journey to uncover the identity of the killer was a painstaking investigative process. What motivated these heinous acts? And more importantly, how did the perpetrator manage to conceal his crimes for decades? This is the story of the most notorious serial killer in US history, and the journey to unravel his crimes. Don't forget to like and subscribe to uncover the chilling truth behind this story. On September 5, 2012, on a bleak Wednesday morning, California police, in coordination with local forces, arrested a man at a homeless shelter in Louisville, Kentucky. The man was Samuel Little, 72 years old, a drifter with a long criminal history. Samuel was arrested for drug trafficking charges. After the arrest, the police collected Samuel Little's DNA sample and entered it into the CODIS national database. The results were shocking. His DNA matched samples from 3 unsolved murders in Los Angeles. The first case occurred on July 13, 1987. The victim was Carol Alford, a woman found dead near a dumpster in an alley in Los Angeles. Her body had multiple bruises and showed signs of sexual assault. The cause of death was determined to be asphyxiation. The second case happened on September 3, 1987. The victim, Guadalupe Apodaca, was found in an abandoned auto repair shop. Her injuries and cause of death were identical to Carol's. The third case occurred on August 14, 1989. The victim, Audrey Nelson Everett, was found in a dumpster. Like the other victims, she was sexually assaulted, and the cause of death was asphyxiation. The common thread in all 3 cases was that the victims were sex workers. Additionally, their money and valuable items were stolen, suggesting the motive wasn't solely murder. Investigators delved deeper into Samuel Little's past. Old investigative records were re-examined, revealing a chilling picture of his history. Samuel Little was a man with an extensive criminal record, including theft, assaults against women, and attempted murder. Having been imprisoned dozens of times, Samuel managed to evade justice thanks to weak investigative systems at the time, especially since his victims were often marginalized individuals. In January 2013, Samuel Little was formally charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder related to the deaths of Carol Alford, Guadalupe Apodaca, and Audrey Nelson Everett. Prosecutors presented irrefutable DNA evidence, confirming that Samuel's DNA matched the samples found on the victims' bodies. One of Samuel's survivors from the 1980s unexpectedly appeared in court as a witness. She detailed how he approached, attacked, and attempted to kill her. Samuel Little denied all accusations, proclaiming his innocence. He claimed he did not know the victims and that it was all a misunderstanding. However, his defense couldn't counter the strong DNA evidence presented by the prosecution. On September 25, 2014, after nearly 2 years of detention, Samuel Little was sentenced to 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole. He was incarcerated at California State Prison in Los Angeles. Despite being convicted, Samuel Little continued to claim his innocence and sought appeals. However, his efforts were repeatedly denied due to the overwhelming evidence against him. In May 2018, a Texas investigator researching a cold case in Odessa, Texas, discovered alarming similarities to Samuel Little's modus operandi. The case involved Denise Brothers, a 38-year-old sex worker who earned money to support her alcohol and drug addiction. Denise had a tragic past, with 4 failed marriages and losing custody of her children. On a January night in 1994, Denise accepted a ride with a man in a white car introduced by a broker. She was never seen alive again. A month later, on February 2, 1994, Denise's body was found in an empty field in Odessa. She was found lying on her back, one arm tucked underneath her body, showing signs of sexual assault. The cause of death was asphyxiation. Forensic doctors found semen from 2 men on her body. One was the broker and the other was a client. Both men had alibis, turning the case into an unsolved mystery for over 20 years. More than 2 decades later, Texas investigators reopened the case. They believed Samuel Little might be the culprit, as the murder method matched his pattern in other cases. Samuel's movement records showed he was in Texas at the time of the crime, further solidifying suspicions. This prompted investigators to visit the Los Angeles prison to interrogate him. During the interrogation in May 2018, Samuel Little, then 78 years old, was in poor health due to diabetes and heart disease. Despite his physical decline, his mind remained sharp, and his cold, emotionless gaze met the investigators' questions. Samuel Little frequently complained about the living conditions at Los Angeles County Jail, where he was serving 3 life sentences. He claimed the environment was unsuitable for his deteriorating health, including his diabetes and heart issues. He repeatedly requested a transfer to a facility with better conditions, but all his appeals were denied. Frustrated, Samuel proposed a deal to the investigators, offering cooperation in exchange for better living conditions. Samuel set a condition: he would confess to unresolved cases and provide testimony if he was transferred to a prison with improved facilities. After consulting with 2 FBI agents, Texas investigators reached a plea agreement with Samuel. Under the agreement, Samuel would avoid the death penalty if he confessed to his crimes and cooperated with the investigation. He would also be transferred to a prison in West Texas with better conditions. As soon as the deal was signed, Samuel Little's demeanor shifted. From being uncooperative and silent, he began confessing to 3 unsolved murders in Los Angeles. He also admitted to killing Denise Brothers in Odessa, Texas, recounting chilling details about how he committed the crime. Samuel revealed that on the night of Denise's murder, he contacted a broker to find a victim. After some negotiation, the broker arranged for Denise to meet Samuel. Denise got into Samuel's white car, unaware it would be her last journey. He drove her to a secluded alley. During the drive, Samuel told Denise he was an artist and could draw her portrait. Denise smiled faintly, not realizing his cold eyes were watching her through the rearview mirror. When they arrived at the alley, Denise became suspicious of the desolate surroundings. Before she could react, Samuel grabbed her and dragged her to the back seat. Samuel choked Denise, preventing her from breathing. The more she struggled, the more exhilarated he became. Within minutes, Denise was dead. When recounting the incident, Samuel showed no remorse. His voice was steady, as if narrating an ordinary story. This sent chills down the investigators' spines. Samuel not only admitted to these 4 murders, but also revealed he had killed dozens of other women over more than 30 years. Many of these cases had never been documented. In the fall of 1982, Samuel, then 42 years old, murdered an African-American woman in New Orleans, Louisiana. The woman was around 30 to 40 years old, 1.72 meters tall, with brown hair, and dressed elegantly. They met at a birthday party. During their conversation, the woman mentioned she was living with her sick mother and had to take care of her. Samuel feigned concern, promising to take her home while planning his crime. That rainy night, Samuel lured her to a secluded forested area. There, he attacked her, choking her until she died. He then dumped her body in the Mississippi River before leaving Louisiana. In 1993, Samuel, then 53, drove his yellow Cadillac through Las Vegas, Nevada, en route to Los Angeles. There, he met a woman in her 40s. The woman, a sex worker, had a 20-year-old son. Samuel persuaded her to accompany him, promising to take her home after they stopped at a motel. Once at the motel, Samuel attacked her. Using his usual method, he killed her and placed her body in his car trunk. He then drove to the outskirts of Las Vegas, disposing of her body on a hillside and throwing her clothes farther away to erase evidence. This case was never documented by the police, and the woman's body may never have been found. In April 1994, in Little Rock, Arkansas, Samuel met a 24-year-old African-American woman. She agreed to go with him, and they lived together for 3 days. During that time, they stole items from stores, with the woman selling the stolen goods. Samuel was later arrested at a grocery store for shoplifting. After being booked at the police station, Samuel was released. He returned to his residence and convinced the woman to accompany him to Bentonville, Arkansas, the next day. On the way, Samuel drove down a remote road. He stopped, attacked, and strangled the woman to death. He then dumped her body in a desolate field nearby. In his confession, Samuel provided detailed descriptions of each victim. Despite his age, his memory remained remarkably sharp, leaving investigators stunned. When asked why he targeted African-American women who were sex workers or marginalized individuals, Samuel coldly replied, "If I killed a young white girl in their neighborhood, everyone would know the next day. But if the victim was a black woman, no one would know or care. Samuel admitted that he exploited society's indifference toward marginalized groups to commit his crimes. He knew the police would pay less attention to cases involving such victims. Samuel's memory contained nearly 100 victims. Some victims were not even documented by the police, yet he could still recall their names or describe them in detail. For those he couldn't remember by name, Samuel drew their portraits to assist the investigation. The FBI identified over 50 cases linked to Samuel Little, but many others remained unverified. The bodies of some victims have never been found, leaving the true number of cases unresolved. By December 2018, Samuel Little was transferred to Texas to stand trial for the murder of Denise Brothers. At trial, he was sentenced to another life term, totaling 4 life sentences without parole. Following the trial, Samuel continued cooperating with investigators, providing detailed information about unresolved cases across the United States. By October 2019, the FBI officially declared Samuel Little the most prolific serial killer in U.S. history. They published over 30 portraits drawn by Samuel, hoping the public could help identify additional, unidentified victims. It remains hard to comprehend how Samuel Little became such a notorious serial killer. Let's start from his childhood. Samuel Little was born in June 1940 in Reynolds, Georgia, into a poor family. His mother, a drug-addicted prostitute, was arrested for solicitation at 16 and gave birth to him in prison. Samuel's father was unknown. His mother, not wanting a child, tried to abort the pregnancy by tying a rope around her belly but failed. A few months after his birth, his mother was released. On a rainy night, she abandoned Samuel on a dirt road. A neighbor in Lorain, Ohio, found and rescued him. Samuel was cared for by his grandmother, but his childhood was full of emotional trauma and neglect. His impoverished family rarely paid attention to him, leaving him feeling abandoned. In kindergarten, Samuel was touched inappropriately by a teacher, leaving a deep psychological scar of insecurity and shame. In elementary school, Samuel witnessed a teacher touching herself in class. This sparked strange feelings in him and a compulsion to harm others to gain control over his emotions. In his bedroom, Samuel hung a picture from a true crime magazine showing a woman being violently attacked. He spent hours staring at the image, fantasizing about violent acts. By high school, Samuel's academic performance deteriorated. His family's poverty meant they couldn't support him, and he eventually dropped out to join a local gang. From then on, he became entrenched in social vices and drug addiction. In 1953, at the age of 13, Samuel was arrested for stealing a bicycle. He was sent to a technical school for boys, essentially a juvenile detention center for delinquents. During his time there, Samuel frequently caused trouble. He fought with classmates, defied teachers, and was punished over 40 times in 18 months. The reform school failed to rehabilitate him. Upon release, he resumed committing crimes, from theft to public disturbances, becoming a local nuisance. In 1956, at 16, Samuel was arrested again for theft and imprisoned. After his release, he returned to his criminal ways. By 1961, Samuel was arrested again for breaking into a furniture warehouse. This time, he was sentenced to 3 years in prison. In 1964, at 24, Samuel was released early for good behavior. After his release, he roamed across the United States, living a transient lifestyle. A few years later, at his mother's urging, Samuel moved to Miami, Florida, to live with her. He worked as a cemetery caretaker and ambulance attendant, but his criminal journey had just begun. From 1964 to 1975, Samuel traveled across the U.S., attacking women in Denver, soliciting sex workers in North Carolina, stealing in Portland and Philadelphia, and driving drunk in Los Angeles. Over 11 years, Samuel was arrested 26 times in 11 states for crimes like theft, assault, trespassing, fraud, and attacking government officials. Most sentences were short, and he even won a few cases. Samuel's first murder occurred on New Year's Eve 1970 at a bar in Miami. He spotted a blonde woman in a red dress and fishnet stockings. The woman, named Mary Broley, 33, was a professional sex worker. After agreeing to her terms, Samuel and Mary drove to a desolate area near a swamp. Once sure they were alone, he attacked her, killing her instantly. It was his first murder. After the crime, Samuel was terrified, but kept his composure. He buried Mary's body in a nearby forest, hoping his crime would remain undiscovered. 3 weeks later, a man and his son found Mary's decomposing body while hunting. They reported it to the police, but her face was unrecognizable, and the cause of death couldn't be determined. Investigators estimated the woman to be 30 to 40 years old and buried for about 2 months. Her fingerprints didn't match any records, and the police couldn't identify her. With no clear evidence, the police concluded she had died accidentally while drunk. The case wasn't considered a homicide, and Samuel realized he had escaped justice. From that night, Samuel realized he could kill without being caught. A monster within him awoke. Every night, he roamed the streets looking for victims, usually targeting sex workers or marginalized individuals. His crimes didn't stop in Miami. He expanded his reach from Florida to other states, becoming a true predator. Between 1974 and 1988, using the same methods, Samuel Little committed dozens of murders, totaling 93 victims. This number far exceeded the combined total of Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer's victims, making Samuel the most notorious serial killer in U.S. history. In December 2020, Samuel Little died at the age of 80 in a California prison, ending a criminal career spanning 35 years. Samuel's death was attributed to natural causes, with no signs of foul play. However, many of his victims remain unidentified. The FBI confirmed over 60 victims out of the 93 Samuel confessed to. More than 30 remain unknown, their cases still unrecorded or unresolved. Samuel's life serves as a chilling example of the convergence of adverse social conditions, distorted psychology, and systemic legal failures that allowed him to commit his crimes. Samuel Little is remembered not only as a serial killer, but also as a grim reminder of society's neglect toward vulnerable individuals, turning them into easy prey for predators. This video concludes here. If you enjoyed it, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel to follow more thrilling stories. Thank you for accompanying us, and see you in the next video.